There was a whole controversy about how you included Train's Hey Soul Sister at the end of Purity, something ridiculous like that. So,
But that's so funny, that particular one, because they don't realize I did it specifically as a fuck you to the hipsters. It's like, does it need to be any clearer? There's a reference to a song which was used in a car ad, and is very, very uncool if you have even like a hip pinky joint. You will writhe at the idea that this Train song might be included in a respectable novel. I don't like the hipsters. They sense that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvonne Hunter. I'm the head of programming here at the Appel Salon at the Toronto Public Library. Over the course of a season, as many of you know, I preface introductions with a preview of upcoming events. For the past several months, I have grown accustomed to hearing myself say, and on October 27th, we present Jonathan Franzen in conversation with the Globe and Mail's Mark Medley. And now, tonight, it is my great pleasure to say, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we present Jonathan Franzen in conversation with the Globe and Mail's Mark Medley. Purity comes 5 years after Freedom and 14 years after The Corrections. Both novels were called masterpieces of American fiction. To say the same of Purity, says Time magazine, might be true but misses the point. Magisterial sweep is now just what Franzen does, and his new novel appears as a simple, enjoyable reminder of his sharp-eyed presence, which perhaps explains why in the first pages I felt myself plunged into a penetrating self-awareness. Is this me? Have I turned into my mother? Is this my daughter? Is this how we are? This is one of Mr. Franzen's great gifts, immersing us in the humbling, sometimes humiliating reality of parent-child relationships. The stories of the characters in Purity open inward, says the New York Times, burrowing into our psyches, and underscoring what seems like Mr. Franzen's determination to create people capable of change, perhaps even transcendence. Jonathan Franzen is widely acknowledged to hold a place in the company of America's greatest authors, and comparisons to Dickens abound with this new novel. Like the great novelists of the past, he convinces us that his vision unmasks the world in which we actually live, says the New Republic. And this reminds me, in The Corrections, on the cruise ship, of the humbling moment when a confused family patriarch throws himself overboard and then clings to life with all his might. And that moment evoked such breathtaking empathy for me. Our host for this evening is Mark Medley, the Globe and Mail's books editor. Prior to joining the Globe, Mark spent 7 years at the National Post as arts reporter and books editor. He is a major contributor to Canadian literary culture. He last interviewed Steven Pinker on this stage, and I welcome his insights on tonight's conversation. And now, please join me in welcoming Jonathan Franzen, who's going to read for us.
I'm going to start with a short reading before Mark and I talk, and then we throw it open to some questions from you. I did want to mention that I've become very anti-photograph over the years, and so just a small plea from the author, no pictures. And since we're all here, maybe I'll just say why no pictures. And it more or less has to do with having had a camera shoved in my face, or actually usually a smartphone shoved in my face a few too many times, without even a word being spoken. Just need to have the picture. And the more I see it, I mean, I'm not being disingenuous, I just find it puzzling why the photograph has become necessary. We're here now, aren't we? And I've taken it up with people who then say, yes, but I need to know I was there. And it's like, I don't know where to begin. Anyway, a small request. "Oh, Pussycat, I'm so glad to hear your voice," the girl's mother said on the telephone. "My body is betraying me again. Sometimes I think my life is nothing but one long process of bodily betrayal." "Isn't that everybody's life?" the girl, Pip, said. She'd taken to calling her mother midway through her lunch break at Renewable Solutions. It brought her some relief from the feeling that she wasn't suited for her job, that she had a job that nobody could be suited for, or that she was a person unsuited for any kind of job. And then, after 20 minutes, she could honestly say that she needed to get back to work. "My left eyelid is drooping," her mother explained. "It's like there's a weight on it that's pulling it down, like a tiny fisherman's sinker or something." "Right now?" "Off and on. I'm wondering if it might be Bell's palsy." "Whatever Bell's palsy is, I'm sure you don't have it." "If you don't even know what it is, Pussycat, how can you be so sure?" "I don't know, because you didn't have Graves' disease, hyperthyroidism, melanoma." It wasn't as if Pip felt good about making fun of her mother, but their dealings were all tainted by moral hazard, a useful phrase she'd learned in college economics. She was like a bank too big in her mother's economy to fail, an employee too indispensable to be fired for bad attitude. Some of her friends in Oakland also had problematic parents, but they still managed to speak to them daily without undue weirdnesses transpiring, because even the most problematic of them had resources that consisted of more than just their single offspring. Pip was it, as far as her own mother was concerned. "Well, I don't think I can go to work today," her mother said. "My endeavor is the only thing that makes that job survivable, and I can't connect with the endeavor when there's an invisible fisherman's sinker pulling on my eyelid." "Mom, you can't call in sick again. It's not even July. What if you get the actual flu or something?" "And meanwhile, everybody's wondering what this old woman with half her face drooping onto her shoulder is doing bagging their groceries. You have no idea how I envy you your cubicle, the invisibility of it." "Let's not romanticize the cubicle," Pip said. "This is the terrible thing about bodies. They're so visible, so visible." Pip's mother, though chronically depressed, wasn't crazy. She'd managed to hold on to her checkout clerk job at the New Leaf Community Market in Felton for more than 10 years. And as soon as Pip relinquished her own way of thinking and submitted to her mother, she could track what she was saying perfectly well. The only decoration on the gray segments of her cubicle was a bumper sticker. "At least the war on the environment is going well." Her colleagues' cubicles were covered with photos and clippings, but Pip herself understood the attraction of invisibility. Also, she expected to be fired any month now, so why settle in? "Have you given any thought to how you want to not celebrate your not birthday?" she asked her mother. "Frankly, I'd like to stay in bed all day with the covers over my head. I don't need a not birthday to remind me I'm getting older. My eyelid is doing a very good job of that already." "Why don't I make you a cake and I'll come down and we can eat it? You sound sort of more depressed than usual." "I'm not depressed when I see you." Too bad I'm not available in pill form. Could you handle a cake made with stevia?" "I don't know. Stevia does something funny to the chemistry of my mouth. There's no fooling a taste bud in my experience." "Sugar has an aftertaste, too," Pip said, although she knew that argument was futile. "Sugar has a sour aftertaste that the taste bud has no problem with because it's built to report sourness without dwelling on it. The taste bud doesn't have to spend 5 hours registering strangeness, which is what happened to me the one time I drank a stevia drink." "But I'm saying the sourness does linger." "There's something very wrong when a taste bud is still reporting strangeness 5 hours after you had a sweetened drink. Do you know that if you smoke crystal meth even once, your entire brain chemistry is altered for the rest of your life? That's what stevia tastes like to me." "I'm not sitting here puffing on a meth stem, if that's what you're trying to say. I'm saying I don't need a cake." "No, I'll find a different cake. I'm sorry I suggested a kind that's poison to you." I didn't say it was poison. It's simply that stevia does something funny to your mouth chemistry, yeah. Pussycat, I'll eat whatever kind of cake you bring me. Refined sugar won't kill me. I didn't mean to upset you. Sweetheart, please. No phone call was complete before each had made the other wretched. The problem, as Pip saw it, the essence of the handicap she lived with, the presumable cause of her inability to be effective at anything, was that she loved her mother, pitied her, suffered with her, warmed to the sound of her voice, felt an unsettling kind of non-sexual attraction to her body, was solicitous even of her mouth chemistry, wished her greater happiness, hated upsetting her, found her dear. This was the massive block of granite at the center of her life, the source of all the anger and sarcasm that she directed not only at her mother, but more and more self-defeatingly of late, at less appropriate objects. When Pip got angry, it wasn't really at her mother, but at the granite block. Thanks.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the 600 odd of you who are here on a Tuesday night. I know there's a lot going on in the city, and to see so many people here on a weekday night in October is very, very gratifying. I can't speak for the rest of you, but for myself, the opportunity to spend an hour with Jonathan Franzen, one of my favorite writers, is a wonderful way to distract myself from the fact that in about an hour, Game 1 of the World Series is happening, and the Blue Jays are not going to be playing. We were talking backstage, and Jonathan was telling me he's a Mets fan, but I'm still going to go ahead with this interview.
Mets fan is too strong a term.
You were a Phillies fan in '93, though.
I lived in Philadelphia, and yes, the Cruckster, John Kruk. Does anyone remember John Kruk?
He had fantastic hair.
He had fantastic hair. And he was a fantastic hitter, and he became a fantastic commentator. And they had all Darren Dalton, who looked like a cartoon of a handsome third baseman. Or catcher, actually. Anyway, and somehow Toronto beat them.
Yes, of course. So it's a. I was just thinking of this when I heard you read, and I've heard you read a couple of times. You're a very fantastic reader. I wondered, are you a writer that thinks of how the sentences are going to sound when you deliver public readings? Meaning, are you thinking of reading in public when you're actually crafting one of your books?
I was very much actually with the corrections because, when my first novels came out in the late 80s, early 90s, there were no readings, essentially. Readings like the plague hit around 1992. And suddenly all they wanted you to do was readings. And so starting in the mid-90s, I was invited to do readings despite not having a third novel. So I was just like, is there anything on the hard drive to read? And indeed, one of the ways I figured out what the corrections was about was what I found on the hard drive that was readable in public. And I also noticed that I started taking things out after doing these readings, that it made me really aware of what wasn't necessary. Mm-hmm. So there was a time, when, and even now, it's like, better not have a book with no humor in it, because what will you read from?
Mm-hmm. The topic of humor is an interesting one, because I imagine as a writer, you don't know if something's going to be funny until you kind of test it out in a situation like this. It would have been very possible for you to read that segment tonight and have, not that it's not funny, but dead silence.
That's right, and audiences vary.
Yeah.
And yes, and sometimes it's surprising, and it's surprising how consistent it is. I don't remember what it was, but you end up going with the readings that work, so you do them over and over again. And with Freedom, there was like one line that I just had not even thought was funny, and night after night, everyone laughed at that line. It was sort of sad to see statistics in real life working.
I was reading your collection of essays, your latest collection of essays, Farther Away, over the weekend. And one of the pieces in there is a lecture that you delivered, I'm not sure where, called On Autobiographical Fiction. And there was a couple of lines in there that I just wanted to quote to kind of get into purity. You write, "As a writer nowadays, you owe it to the readers to set yourself the most difficult challenge that you have some hope of being equal to. With every book, you have to dig as deep as possible and reach as far as possible." So with purity, what was the challenge you were setting for yourself, and what was it you were reaching for as a writer?
It's almost enough to make one regret publishing that lecture. It's like I taped my own kick me sign to my my butt. Yeah. Well, these are very personal questions, and you'll notice in that lecture, which I gave in I think 2009, I was talking about a book I'd written 10 years earlier, where some of the crucial struggles involved coming to terms with people who by then were dead, and so it was all sort of safely in the past. It's a little riskier to talk about something where the wounds were fresh. I felt I really felt like I'd burned up all the furniture, and that was the metaphor in my head again and again, writing the corrections. Like, and in fact, my friend Donald Antrim said, "Hey man, this was so stupid, you could have gotten 5 novels out of that material." And here I'd put, I'd put these 5 short novels together in one book, which he was representing as a dumb commercial move. But that one hewed actually quite close to some, in many ways the most important thing that happened to me, which was losing my parents. And I felt like I was just burning up all of this great stuff in one book. And then to get Freedom written, I felt like the furniture was already burned, so I had to tear out the walls. And then it felt like there was nothing left, except for this really, the experience with really kind of sick, dark stuff that I had both imaginatively and little tastes of in my real life, and I just stuff I didn't really want to go into. And so the challenge was to see if I could make some of that bearable to read.
The novel...
Particularly the dark places you can get in a relationship that has gone bad.
Yeah. The novel, in part, revolves around, for those of you who haven't read it, a man named Andreas Wolff, and it kind of follows his life from his childhood in East Germany to the present day when he's living in Bolivia, and he's the founder, and he's running an organization called the Sunlight Project, which is being described, is kind of WikiLeaks, but fictional. You told me when we spoke in August that you have been thinking about Andreas for longer than possibly any other fictional character. I think he dates from the 1980s. What's his story, and was he basically the genesis of purity?
Interestingly, he was not. The answer is almost too embarrassing to give, which is, what you end up writing a book about is so much a matter of what you have in hand. Like, it wasn't automatically clear that this California novel, which is also a marriage novel, which is also an East Germany in the 80s novel, and that's not because I had some killer brilliant insight that these things all naturally went together. It's because that's what I had in hand. And yes, I'd been thinking about Andreas for a long time, but he was locked in the 80s. And only when because essentially I wanted to tell the story of this marriage. And then it seemed like, well, there should be another perspective. There should be a child there. And then I thought, well, no, maybe the child doesn't know who her father is. And then, this being the internet age, it seemed like there should be an internet presence, secrets and so on. And we need sort of a leaker figure, because those figures have become sort of folk heroes. And then I realized, but that old East German guy, what about him?
You felt bad for him.
So I mean, but that's how it goes,
Yeah.
right? It's not. There is no organic would be is not the word. It's sort of random and forced. And then the idea, then you try to make it all look like it was meant to be.
There's another character in the book named Tom Aberrant, who runs an investigative journalism website, something kind of modeled on ProPublica, I think. And it's interesting.
Indeed, you'll find the publisher of ProPublica mentioned in the acknowledgments.
Oh, you will. There you go.
Yeah.
In essays you've written in the past and in interviews you've given, you have talked about a character named Andy Aberrant, who you've said originally was supposed to appear as a main character in The Corrections, and then again, I believe he was going to make a cameo in Freedom, but in both cases, he was cut. What's the relationship between...
This is sort of emerging as a theme of tonight.
What's the relationship between Tom and Andy?
Oh, they share a last name.
Is that it? Is it that simple?
Yes, I think it is. I'm proud of what I can do as a novelist. So I don't want to come across as falsely modest or deprecating, self-deprecating, but there is a certain desperate scavenging quality to the way I work, and I'm just going to go ahead and say, Aberrant. I don't know where the name. Oh, I know where it came from. It came from my misreading the name of a Mekons song on one of their mid-'80s or late '80s albums. I think it was Abernant, but I read it as Aberrant, and I thought, well, that's a funny name. And then I don't know where Andy came from. Probably because Andy and Andreas had always sort of like, somehow Andreas has had this hold on me, this name. And then I had the idea of naming his father Gene, which I thought would be really funny. Get it? Gene Aberrant. But then it turned out that Gene was such a great Midwestern name that I had to give it to Walter's father in Freedom, which pretty much reduced the need, obviated the name Aberrant altogether. But by that point, it had become kind of this name that sounded familiar to me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I used it.
Simple as that.
Writers' intentions are famously beside the point, but I'm trying to suggest how really random it is, and what an accretive process it is putting these books together, and also how much you're trying to draw. I am trying to draw from whatever part of my brain that psychological objects dwell in, the kind of things you dream about over and over, and in order to really make characters come alive, they need to become fairly important psychological objects in whatever space that is. It's a waking dream, but it's not that far from a dream, I think, in terms of my psychological relationship to it. And so things that seem familiar, if only because you've been kicking them around in your notes and failed drafts for 20 years, begin to just take on this sort of totemic significance that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just become and little tiny little fragments, a name or an idea for what the father was or something. It's like just little tiny scraps of detail about a character. If they recur, they start to coalesce into some sort of nebulous form that could, with work, become a psychological object that could become a main character in the book.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you.
I have a bad chest cold, and that was actually quite a sentence for me to get out. And your response is sure, as if I need not have said it, because we all know.
You wrote Purity. You wrote Purity at a time when Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks and kind of the culture of sharing of secrets was, for the most part, front page news. I wondered how and if what was going on in the world influenced the fictional world you were creating, or did you try to keep a barrier between the two and not let one bleed into the other?
When was Snowden? What was
2012?
2012,
I
right?
believe. I might be wrong.
Anyone differ? Is it 2000? Was it 2012?
2013.
2013. There you go. Exactly, because that sounded more like it. No, because my recollection was, having planned the book, just roughly, there was going to be a leaker figure, and then along comes Snowden, and I'm thinking, oh, it was just when we were forgetting about Assange, here comes Snowden, and you don't want to seem to be chasing after headlines as a novelist. You want to be ideally anticipating headlines by a year or 5 years or 10 years. Or not caring about headlines at all. And so it was, I remember feeling some anxiety and had to kind of, because, yeah, I actually have sort of a fear of topicality.
Why?
Because I just, because real things are real narratives. They're very strong, and they have this kind of magnetic attraction, and you don't. And the novel is both. It's more robust in the long term. It's news that stays news. To use that was Ezra Pound, or was it William Carlos Williams? One of those people. News that stays news. Again, Pound. Thank you. First thought, best
Thank you,
thought.
Brad.
I know he meant poetry, but that's why I put the little scare quote intonation around news that stays news. Anyway, so I think narrative fiction, made up stuff is more durable. It's not a 24-hour. It's not this little, fruit fly that reproduces and is gone. That ideally it'll stick around for at least a few years and or a season or two, and so you want to keep it away from. That's why it's so hard to write a baseball novel, because it's like,
The players change.
No, it's
No?
because the narratives are so strong. It's like, what year are we in? What are you talking about? That was the year of the amazing comeback of the Cards against the Rangers. you know, and who is this player? Why would he had 54 home runs last year? Why haven't I heard of him? Because we all know who did have 54 home runs last year. And the same thing with political novels. So you don't want to be. It's very hard to write a really good Washington novel because we know who the players are. And so when a figure like Snowden popped up, it was like, oh man.
I have to ask then, have you tried to write a baseball novel?
No.
That's not.
No, I like Robert Coover's Universal Baseball Association.
Yeah.
That's it's actually a fantastic novel because it's about fantasy baseball essentially. So and he wrote that way early, and it gets around precisely the problem I was talking about because it's it's about a fictional baseball fantasy league of J. Henry Waugh, a.k.a. Yahweh, etc. That's the kind of book it is. But anyway, just a little plug for that old book of Coover's. Check it out. But what other is there a good baseball novel?
Art of Fielding. Didn't you blurb that?
No, I like the novel. It's just, yeah, exactly. And you see, he took it down to collegiate baseball.
Yeah.
Because who knows, do I know who's a star in collegiate baseball? No. So I can read the book and it doesn't bother me.
You have to read W.P. Kinsella, Canadian writer, very good about baseball.
Shoeless Joe, was that?
Joe,
yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, and historical, but that was, anyway, yes,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah. Back.
We're far afield.
Here we are. Back to Andreas. At one point in the novel, he refers to the annihilation of the distinction between private and public. It's a topic that you've been considering for many, many years now. You wrote an essay that was included in How to Be Alone called Imperial Bedrooms, which came out in the aftermath of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. And there's a line in there where you're kind of talking about the privacy panic in America in 1998. Do you feel the same way about the subject that you did in 1998, or have your thoughts on it evolved, this idea of the intersection of the private and the public?
I haven't revisited the question in a systematic way, which is to say I've not tried to write something that my New Yorker editor has had a hand in. My argument there was that people don't really, people know they're supposed to be worried about privacy, but they aren't. That hasn't changed. Hello. I mean, I guess people are worried about the NSA knowing how long their phone call to Toronto from Santa Cruz lasted, but they're apparently not worried about wholesale appropriations of data by the big platforms. Google knows a shocking amount about you, and people don't seem to care. And it was like, and the privacy advocates kept saying, "Oh, but you should care, you should care." And then we said, "Yes, okay, we do care." They would tell the pollsters, but then do nothing about it. And it seemed to me that we had were not thinking about privacy in the right way. But the thing that I was, what I remember from back then was realizing that when I feel my privacy invaded, it's actually usually an invasion of privacy into a public space. So that when someone starts talking to me on a bus while I'm trying to read, or when somebody takes a leak, next to his UPS truck, and delivery truck drivers are often guilty of that particular invasion of publicity, but it's in fact, it's weird because it's like that to me, those I really feel like something is being infringed here. I don't want to know your story, person next to me on the bus. I don't want to see your pee, delivery truck driver. Like, can you not do that in public? That, it occurs to me, of course, is become like such a plague because of the new digital technologies, the personal technologies that we carry on each other, on ourselves, and the level of sharing. And this maybe gets back to the photograph thing a little bit. That there is, I think it's the same world, only even weirder now.
Is it difficult to remain apart from that? I mean, you have been very vocal in your disinterest in being on Facebook, or
who has the time?
Well, many people do. I mean, if we took a show of hands, how many people in this room are on Facebook?
Okay, so
half.
you all have the time.
Exactly. I imagine, especially as a
I mean, but some people are on Facebook because they have to be, or because they have grandkids. No, I mean, for actually, and I understand, if it's used judiciously, it seems like a good way to, kind of keep up. I don't have grandkids, is the thing. So I'm not hostile to Facebook. I'm sorry, it was a mean thing to say, who has the time. I do hear from people who say it takes up a lot of time.
Sure. I mean, you can put in as much time as you want, though, or you can scan it 5 minutes a day and
there you go.
Be done with it. The answer to the secret Pip is trying to learn throughout this novel, one of the through lines, is the identity. Sorry?
Yes.
Is the identity of her father. She wants to know who her father is, which her mother has long kept from her.
I would correct that, if I may.
How so?
She's briefly interested when it occurs to her she could get money from this father.
True.
And as soon as someone starts making the loan payments on her student debt, she kind of loses interest. She's not burning. I would in fact submit that she has no interest in getting to know her father, and that and the only motive was financial.
You think so?
Hello? Yes?
No.
I do.
I read it different. I thought it was a driving part of it.
Cite me chapter and verse.
Well,
It's, first of all, we find out rather early in the book who the father is, so it is not an overarching secret for the book, and
we don't actually. Well, we can guess who her father is, right? Am I?
no, I think we pretty much know about a third of the way through.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, but
I'm disagreeing with the author here. I know it's like number one rule.
it's embarrassing for both of us. Let me tell you.
But my question was, even
Yes.
that's a little tangent. If there was a secret about your life or your family that a Sunlight Projects-esque organization could help you discover, what would it be? I mean, what is something about your life that you're interested in knowing? No, I asked you this in August, and you had a great answer to it that I was not able to use. That's why I'm asking.
I'm already nostalgic for how young and energetic I was in August. What was my answer, Mark?
You said you suspect you might have Jewish roots, and you'd be interested in finding out if there's any validity into that.
Oh yeah, that's true. But didn't I also say, but it's such a much better story if it's just a story and I don't find out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because to some extent, for one thing, it seems like it's quite a persuasive, direct matrilineal possibility. Because my mom was very defensive about it, and I enjoyed asking her because she partook of a sort of a low-key, it wasn't exactly Midwestern anti-Semitism, but Jews were other and weird, and you didn't want to be, don't be asking that. They were Catholic. They lived in Eastern Hungary and had the name Selinsky, but they were Catholic. Don't you get it? It was like, okay, Mom. And I just, it's kind of fun not to know. Yep. It's just like, oh, that's weird. And does it make any difference? No. And the game lost some of its fun when my mom died.
Yeah. You've written at length about yourself in 2 essay collections and the short memoir, The Discomfort Zone. How do you strike a balance between revealing your life in your writing and maintaining some semblance of privacy, speaking in light of a novel that kind of investigates some of those questions?
I don't know if I do strike a balance. As you see, I can't remember what I disclosed just 2 months before.
You have a good excuse.
But no, I mean, I fear that I've disclosed more than I remember disclosing, and that I got all sort of, oh, no, I can't talk about that, about things that like, oh, but you did say this 5 years ago. It's like, or you did write this 5 years ago, even worse. Partly it is a matter of selective, the discomfort zone was very much intended as a fire break. Mm-hmm. Did we talk about that in August too?
No, we did not.
You were nodding, so you got me worried. You were nodding as if you might say sure again.
I'm never going to live that down.
So a bit of a fire break in that I exposed all sorts of things I never thought I would expose. I told stories about my adolescence, things that I've been ashamed of all my life. I told a story about what I'd done at the age of 6 or 7 to entertain the neighbor girls. I think these things that were really, deep, shameful secrets for me, I threw out there. So that all the while knowing that even deeper stuff, and actually more day-to-day stuff, my real private life in the present, I was not going to talk about. But and there was a way in which strategic confession. Not only I thought you can make some interesting, hopefully funny writing out of it, but it also creates the impression that I've disclosed a lot, and I hoped, like the fire break, that it would prevent intrusion into my actual present-day private life.
How do you maintain that barrier? Especially right now, you're on book tour for 2 months, you're doing media, you're doing events like this. You have people asking you about those aspects of your life. How difficult is it to kind of hold back?
Not that difficult. My experience of I've done a lot of events like this, and I'm very impressed actually with how incredibly nice. First of all, again, coming out on a Tuesday, to hear a writer with hardly a voice. You didn't know that, of course, but but also just how genuinely. I think people who read a lot of books and care about books, they understand that the place where it's happening is on the page, both for the writer and for the reader, and so you're not subjected to the kind of pressures of projection that like a film star might be, mm-hmm. or an athlete. Partly because it's an audience that knows what the rules are for. So it's surprisingly not that much of a problem.
At the same time, I mean, since Purity was published, it seems a week hasn't gone by without you being attacked for something, and just a short list, No, I think. For your comments about adopting Iraqi war orphans, for the lunch with the Financial Times, for for
that I was attacked for having lunch with the Financial Times.
Yeah, Gawker did something on it about you mentioned how you were in.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, no, exactly. There was a whole controversy about how you included Train's Hey Soul Sister at the end of Purity, something ridiculous like that. So,
but that's so funny, that particular one, because because they don't realize I did it specifically as a fuck you to the hipsters. It's like, does it need to be any clearer? Pip and Jason, oops, sorry, but Pip and this guy say, no, it's all right. There's a reference to a song which was used in a car ad, and is very, very uncool if you have even like a hip pinky, a hip pinky joint. You will writhe at the idea that this train song might be included in a respectable novel. Like, how uncool can you get, dude? But they comment themselves on how uncool it is, and they say it's a great dance song, which it is. And that's kind of, to me, isn't that what counts?
Yeah.
I don't like the hipsters. They sense that.
But going back to what I was saying about putting yourself out there and you know, looking at some of the media coverage, for instance, The Atlantic had a headline, Jonathan Franzen strikes again, like you're, you know, an outlaw bank robber. I mean, I'm curious how you square the fact that on one hand, you're one of our most admired writers, and yet there seems to be this cottage industry that has developed around mocking you.
You know, I don't know. People have a lot of time on their hands. There's really no way for me to seriously engage with that question.
Okay.
No. I can engage on an individual case-by-case basis. You know, someone says, I mean, the Iraqi war baby thing, I did engage with that, and I basically called the Guardian, you know, the online Guardian, it's become the Daily Mail. I mean, I insulted the Guardian at every turn in England because that was such a stupid, low tabloid thing they did, with further egg on their face because the same factoid, the same important factoid had been reported in Time magazine 5 years earlier in a cover story,
That's
which
true.
of course they wouldn't have noticed because they become the Daily Mail. In case you didn't know, a kind of low tabloid of the UK. And so I'll fight back if it's brought to my attention. And that one I cared about because I liked the reporter. Let's talk about this for a moment. I liked the reporter, Emma Brox. She was really good. And by all accounts, she wrote a really good piece. And the editors came in at the last minute and pulled something out of context from her piece, blew it up as if that was the whole story, had some third party write a 150-word squib. That became the story. Emma Brox, who had like a 6-month-old baby she was taking a red eye back to New York to be with, had come up. She wrote the thing under incredible deadline pressure, did by all accounts a fantastic job, a nuanced job. Nobody, and people referred to, and they talked about the Guardian piece, they don't even use the right name of the author. They use the person who wrote the 150-word little crap piece that was tweetable. What's to like about this? It's disgusting. But to engage with the larger question of, I don't care is the problem. And I do feel like, I understand why you're asking, but I really feel like I'm the wrong person to ask about the weird disconnect. It's, you know, I can keep making general comments about how online discourse is incredibly polarized and the economic structure of the web encourages extreme, irresponsible, usually extremely negative comment and discourages anything boring and moderate and nuanced and correct, because nobody's going to click on that. Nobody wants that. So you can make these sort of structural arguments about why that's the case, but and it could be that because I make those structural arguments, that's annoying to people who believe in the truth value of extreme, but who believes in the truth value of Gawker? Who cares? Why are we talking about Gawker? Gawker, stupid, ugh, hideous, like, yuck.
Let's get back to the novel then. There is a lot.
Really? I mean, wow.
But it's interesting. I
Gawker.
ask because it's interesting to me that it seems half of the ink surrounding you these days is not necessarily simply about purity, but it's about comments you make or issues people have with your characters. I mean, you're one of the only writers I can think of who is in this position. That's why I ask. And I can imagine it's probably tiring to have it brought to your attention.
It is making me count the days till I can go and shut the door behind me.
10 days.
But the thing is, I don't actually get it much on the road, except occasionally in questions on stage. No, seriously, because there really is a disconnect between people who like to read novels and people who like to comment on public figures.
Sure.
And it's a pretty serious disconnect, actually. Shall we go to the audience?
We shall go to the audience.
Thank you. I've given you a hard time.
No, please do.
No, but rightly so, because I think this really speaks to the whole media echo chamber thing that you're talking about, which is really who does give a crap about Gawker, because I think you're probably the only sort of public intellectual out there that smart people can gravitate to. Like Mailer's gone, Gore Vidal's gone, and we need really great people who think long and hard about the world. And that's not necessarily in the form of the novel, but in literary journalism. And I'm really interested in your literary journalism as well, because I think it's so potent and so challenging, and you refuse to accept the status quo. So just maybe tell us a little bit about being both a novelist and a journalist, and that way those two things maybe marry.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear. I do have strong opinions, I admit, and I came to feel that the novel was not a good place to be expressing opinions. So in the 90s, I realized it would be good to separate those functions. And the thing about journalism and essay writing is I go in with an opinion, but I often don't come out with the same opinion. So not only does the nonfiction provide an outlet for stuff that probably shouldn't be in a novel anyway, and after all, how many novels can you write about bird conservation? But also that they become the nonfiction becomes a place to push back against what was the initially motivating anger or strong opinion, and that's partly a matter of just if you're mad and you go and meet the people you're hating, you're going to like some of them, and then you're not going to. Then you're in trouble because you can't hate in the same way. But also because the very process of editing, particularly with Henry Finder at The New Yorker, means that there's somebody there who's smarter than I am, who's saying, but have you considered and have you read? And so I think of them as kind of worlds apart, actually. But occasionally you pick up stuff on the side on a journalism assignment that doesn't go in the piece, and then that goes into the mix, that kind of random mix I was talking about earlier.
something I've found very curious and unique about your novels is that they're stories that I love and that engage me, and characters I feel a lot of empathy for, despite the fact that most of the time I think they're characters that are often hard to like and not inherently likable, even though you feel so much empathy for them. You don't finish off thinking, I loved Walter and I loved Pip, and I wonder if that's something you do intentionally, and what you find, if so, what you find appealing about characters that aren't necessarily easy to like.
Well, I think the world seems to divide into two kinds of people. They're the kind who, when someone is making a mistake, think there's something wrong with that person for making a mistake. And there's the kind whose heart kind of opens up and say, oh, he's making a mistake. And I think most novelists belong to the latter kind. We just instinctively like people who make mistakes, partly because they're like our bread and butter. Where would the novel be if people didn't make mistakes? It's one of the many true terrors of a completely rational, efficient world that technology promises us, that no more mistakes. It's like, fortunately, that technology itself is probably a mistake, and I foresee no future shortage of mistakes. But so, and I don't know which comes first, but I think that people who like to read fiction in general belong to that second camp, and maybe it's because they belong to that camp that they like to read novels, or it could be actually a mutually reinforcing thing. But it's funny how my own sense. Okay, here, let me be completely frank in a way that jet lag and a cold perhaps are contributing to. I talked to a fair number of journalists, and I just talked to a fair number of journalists in Europe, and it's weird. You can tell which ones the hostile ones are. And the hostile ones tend to say, I can't relate to these characters. They are so toxic, they're so unhappy. I don't know anyone who's unhappy like that. I don't know I don't know anyone who would have a relationship like that with his mother or her mother. I don't recognize this at all. And they seem like really angry people. And then these completely sweet, and I'm thinking in particular of two people in Krakow just this last weekend. There was this one person who just seemed clearly pretty, and I'm not blaming her for being unhappy. Quite the opposite. I'm sorry she's unhappy, but she did not seem like a happy person. And she was, and the complaint was, why these toxic people? And whereas this completely sweet seeming person was saying, well, of course, yes, this is awful. and like, you could tell that part of her sweetness was that she had some understanding of what awfulness was like, probably from her own life, because who, let's face it, isn't at some point in their life awful? So I consider it it's a pleasure to write about people in trouble, because they make good stories and dramatic scenes, but also I feel a certain responsibility to do it too, because I'm trying to reach the people who, and trying to cultivate compassion for people who are making mistakes, really, basically. And then there's a whole array of tricks you can use as a novelist to generate sympathy and to even generate a certain amount of likability. I introduce a dog near the end of this book. Like, dogs work. Anyway, I'm shot. Thank you all for coming out
Thank you,
tonight.
Jonathan,
Thank
so
you very
much.
much, Mark.